so helpful that I wrote that down. So we are recording this, so if you have colleagues who are unable to attend, we can shoot them the link.
TV won't give us. Really.
Martin was able to, we apparently have had a YouTube channel for our whole existence, well, not our whole, for a couple of years now. So we'll be able to put this up on the YouTube channel, and there'll also be a link from our TSAALL site. So we'd like to thank the AALL Continuing Education Committee and the TSSIS webinar
subcommittee. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. I was like, oh, what is that? So that one's a subcommittee for coordinating this, and especially to Jean for being willing to have a go at it. Thank you very much, Jean. I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks very much, Suzanne, and thanks everyone for tuning in. I'd like to say greetings from snowy Ithaca, New York, where it has been snowing all day long. I'm going to start with a little bit of an introduction to the MARC Advisory Committee, because there's probably at least one person who is not familiar with how it works, and so I'm just going to give a little bit of background about that. And I'll talk about the discussion papers and the proposal that we discussed at AALL midwinter. And there's one that was particularly controversial, so I'm anxious to get people's reaction to it. And Suzanne is going to put up a little poll at that point for us, so I can get your feedback about it as well. So right now, what I'm going to do is try and get my slides up on the screen right now. Okay. Okay. Can people see that, the slides? Yes, I hope. Okay. So the MARC Advisory Committee advises the MARC Steering Group, and the MARC Steering Group is composed of the Library of Congress, the Library and Archives Canada, the British Library, and the Deutsche Nationalbibliothek. The MARC Advisory Committee, which I'll probably just refer to as MAC, advises the steering group concerning changes to the MARC 21 formats, of which there are 5, but mostly we focus on the Bibliographic Authority and Holdings formats as a practical matter. So we do hold votes. Any body or entity can bring discussion papers to the MARC Advisory Committee. Usually it will be people like the PCC, or subcommittee of the PCC. Sometimes it will be a national library. Very often the British Library or the German National Library will bring us things. We've had proposals from the Finnish National Library. The Music Library Association is a huge, huge contributor of these papers. So they write these papers that we study and discuss as a group. At the meetings, there's meetings at AALL midwinter and AALL annual, 2 meetings at each conference. We talk about the discussion papers, we sort of give our reactions to them, problems that we might see, issues that are concerning us, and the entity that brought it to us will decide, either give up and go home, or they might make some refinements, or they might just take it pretty much as it is and recast it as a proposal, and it's the proposals that we vote on as a committee. The committee votes on changes, but it's the actual steering committee, that is those 4 national libraries, that have the final authority on any changes that we make to the format. Okay, so I'm just going to pause on this for a while. There were, at this last meeting, AALL midwinter, we had 1 proposal and 6 discussion papers. So we only actually voted on 1 thing, but we discussed 6 other papers besides. What I'm planning to do is I'm going to go over the proposal and 5 of the discussion papers fairly quickly, and then I want to go into more detail with one of the other discussion papers, because it was very controversial, and I think it might be interesting for you all to see what the controversy was about. Okay. So the first proposal is called Coding 007 Field Positions for Digital Cartographic Materials in the MARC 21 Bibliographic and Holdings formats. This was brought to MAC by the Canadian Committee on Metadata Exchange and the AALL Map and Geospatial Information Roundtable, which is also known as MAGIRT. This was a sort of a follow-up to a proposal that was made a couple of years ago by the Music Library Association. I think it was Music Library Association. They wanted to have a code in the 007, which is physical description, by the way, to provide better description of digital recordings. So the map people thought, well, we ought to have something for digital cartographic resources in that field, that physical description field. So they had brought a discussion paper to us probably at annual last year. If we had any suggestions, they incorporated it into this proposal. We voted on the proposal, and it passed unanimously. So this was not a controversial proposal at all. The next one, which I'm going to defer until closer to the end, is about defining a new subfield I in fields 600 through 630 of the MARC 21 bibliographic format. So that's the one that was really controversial. I'm going to wait on that one. The next discussion paper that we talked about, discussion paper 2, that one was called Subfield Coding in Field 041 for Accessibility in the MARC 21 bibliographic format. This was sponsored by the Canadian Committee on Metadata Exchange. It has to do with video recordings and providing access to visual and audio content by employing either supplementary visual description, such as described audio, and captioning or signing for the hearing impaired. The discussion paper recommends that subfield coding be added to field 041, which is language code, in the MARC 21 bibliographic format, to indicate that language codes for written languages providing access to moving image audio content, indicate that there are language codes for spoken languages, language codes for written languages, language codes for signed languages, all of which are used to provide access for either the visually impaired or the hearing impaired to the content of moving picture content. So there was a lot of support for this idea among the committee members, and it's very likely that because it was so broadly supported, it's going to come back as a proposal, maybe at annual in June, and that's when the committee will vote on it, and it will become part of the MARC format. The next discussion paper that we talked about is called Inventory of Newer 3XX Fields that Lack Subfield 3 in the MARC 21 bibliographic format. This is from the Music Library Association. The Music Library Association advocates for defining subfield 3, that's material specified, for fields 377, that's associated language, 380, which is form of work, 381, other distinguishing characteristics of work or expression, and 383, which is numeric designation of musical work. This is all in the MARC 21 bibliographic format. Subfield 3 allows catalogers to better associate metadata with specific pieces of the bibliographic description. This is, obviously this is important in music cataloging because music catalogers often create metadata in bibliographic records that applies only to one part of the resource being cataloged. For example, a sound recording with a number of separate pieces on it. Some of the MAC committee members noted that the non-standardized textual nature of subfield 3s limits machine actionability. The need for improved examples was also noted. After some discussion, the decision was made to accept this discussion paper as a proposal. So this is a procedural thing that does sometimes happen at the MAC meetings where we read a discussion paper and, we're perfectly fine with it as it is practically. And so we just, on the spot at the table, say, let's vote on this as the proposal instead of making them jump through any more hoops. So this is what happened with this discussion paper. We just suggested a few changes to the examples, and it was approved by a unanimous vote. The next discussion paper was called Multi-Script Records Using Codes from ISO 15924 in the 5 MARC 21 formats. This paper was brought forward by the German National Library. So to explain what this is about, when the language of cataloging is written in a Latin script and the language of the resource being cataloged is written in a non-Latin script, a common practice for many cataloging agencies using MARC 21 is to transliterate the non-Latin portions of the bibliographic description into Latin script. So that's what you would see in, say, for example, the 245 field, while linking to the same information in the vernacular script using A8 fields. With A8 fields, that's alternate graphic representation. This technique for handling non-Latin scripts is referred to as Model A, or vernacular and transliteration. In Appendix D refers to multi-script records of the MARC 21 bibliographic format. Now, every once in a while, I see these kinds of records in my own work. We don't do a lot with non-Roman scripts in my library, so I don't see them very, very often. But I have seen them. I've seen them with those 880 fields, and I had no idea that we're following something called Model A, but they were. And if you go to the MARC 21 bibliographic format and look at Appendix D, you will see it right there, clearly labeled. Okay, so in these 880 fields, subfield 6, that means linkage, is used in the 880 fields to link the transliterated field to its vernacular counterpart. One of the pieces of information encoded in subfield 6 within an 880 field is the script identification code. That is, a code that identifies the first script encountered in a left to right scan of the field. The codes currently authorized for this purpose are Arabic, Latin, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, that's a single code, Cyrillic, Greek, and Hebrew. According to the discussion paper, these values seem to be derived from the MARC 8 character set, which is an implementation of ISO. I don't know what this all stands for. I mean, I know ISO, International Standards Organization. This is IEC 2022. I think it's International Engineering something. Now that many library systems code their data in UTF-8, UTF standing for Unicode Transformation Format, the German National Library recommends that ISO standard 15924, which is called Codes for the Representation of Names of Scripts, be used as the source for the script identification code portion of subfield 6 subfields in 880 fields. ISO 15924 lists both alphabetic and numeric codes for dozens of scripts beyond the 6 currently available. This discussion paper received general support from many committee members, although concern was expressed as to how legacy data would be handled. This paper will probably be returning to the committee as a proposal. Okay, the next discussion paper, number 5. This is called Adding Institution Level Information to Subject Headings in the MARC 21 bibliographic format. This is another one from the German National Library, and it is it's a follow-on to a discussion paper that we saw last year. I think it was, yeah, midwinter 2017. So the story behind this paper is subfield 5 is used in certain fields of the MARC 21 format to indicate the MARC code of the institution or organization that holds the copy to which the data in the field applies. Data in the field may not apply to the universal description of the resource, or may apply universally to the resource but be of interest only to the location cited. At midwinter 2017, the German National Library introduced a discussion paper that proposed extending the definition of subfield 5 to the 6XX range. So those are subject access fields in the bibliographic format in order to express the idea that a particular subject heading or term has been used in accordance with the policy of a specific organization. At that time, the paper generated a relatively long discussion during which the committee members expressed reluctance to conflate the kinds of information expressed in a subfield that has historically contained item level information with work level information associated with subject headings. So now the German National Library has come back with a similar discussion paper, but this paper offers the option of encoding institution level information in the 6XX range of fields in field 883, which is machine generated metadata provenance. The 883 field is currently defined, refers to machine generated metadata only, and would have to be redefined to encompass the idea of intellectually assigned metadata. The authors of the paper also suggest renaming the field metadata provenance, so not machine generated, but just plain metadata provenance. Some committee members are not completely convinced by the German National Library's use case for this change. Nonetheless, the Germans were advised to pursue the 883 alternative rather than the subfield 5 option. And once again, this paper may resurface as a proposal. The fact is that when I leave these meetings where we've discussed discussion papers, it's not ever really clear whether the people are going to come back with a proposal or not. Most of the time they do. Okay. Another one from the German National Library. This one is called Versions of Resources in the MARC 21 Bibliographic Format. In this paper, the German National Library suggests several ways of designating different versions of a resource in a MARC bibliographic record. Specifically, the paper addresses the situation commonly associated with journal articles in electronic form where preprints, postprints, and the published version of an article may all be available simultaneously to readers who may be unaware of which version they are reading. The discussion paper outlines several approaches toward handling this situation. One is coding in an 008 fixed field nature of contents byte. Another one is designation as a genre form term in field 655. Another one is use of field 562. Field 562 is the copy and version identification note. And the last approach that they suggest as a possibility is a new subfield to be added to the 250 field, the addition statement, designating version information and possibly using terms from a controlled vocabulary. The need to differentiate among various versions of an article in electronic form received wide support among the committee members. Those expressing a preference from among the options set forth in the paper seem to favor adding a new subfield to the 250 field. Subfield V, I think, is what they wanted, for V for version. This paper may return to the committee as a proposal, so we'll have to wait and see on that. Okay. So, just 1 second here. I'm wondering if there's any questions, Suzanne, before I go on to the next portion here.
So we haven't seen anything come up in the chat box, but y'all take your time. If you have some questions, this would be a good break to come in.
They're stunned into silence. Okay. I'm going to go back to my slides now. Let's see, there it is. Okay, so this is a discussion paper that I wanted to spend a little more time on, 2018 DP01. And this is called Defining New Subfield I in fields 600 through 630 of the MARC 21 bibliographic format. It was brought to our meeting by the Program for Cooperative Cataloging Standing Committee on Standards. So we had quite a long discussion, a very animated discussion about this paper. And I do think it bears some discussion here as well. So I'm going to show you some of the examples that are in the paper, and you can see what you think for yourself. Okay. 2. The specific fields that would be affected by this proposal are the 600, the 610, the 611, and the 630. The thing that these have in common is that they are access points in the name authority file. There, in other words, they're not subject headings in LCSH per se. Okay. Part of the justification that they're using is that Chapter 23 of RDA provides a general guidelines and instructions on recording relationships between works and subjects. Appendix M of RDA provides general guidelines on using relationship designators to specify relationships between works and their subjects and lists relationship designators used for that purpose. As an example, one such relationship designator of interest to law catalogers would be commentary on work, a work used as a basis for a set of explanatory or critical notes. So here's how we would do it nowadays. We've got the 600 field there, author title, access point for the work that's being commented on. And then there's the 700 field that has that subfield I, commentary on work. That's the way we do it now, and this is what the proposal says. Instead of having that 700 field, we'd use that subfield I, commentary on work, and then the author title information following that. So this is the idea of what, is being proposed by the PCC Standing Committee on Standards. Here's a couple of other examples that they use. Now, what's different about these is the second indicator, 7, and then in subfield 2, we're indicating the name authority file, and we have this link. So the particular thing about this is that Romanov Dynasty, subfield D, that's not authorized for subject use. And this is a very nice way of expressing it, I think. Also, if you wanted to use the subject subdivision biography, you can't use it under the name of an entity like that. That's not allowed in LCSH. This is another example with the use of the subfield 7. Once again, identifying the source in subfield 2, it's NAF, and then the identifier right here. Now, the observations made in the paper that the use of an RDA relationship designator allows the field to express with greater precision the nature of the subject relationship than LCSH could do alone, since the subdivision commentaries is restricted to sacred works. Yes, it is. You're not allowed to, have the name of some law or treaty or something like that subdivided by commentaries. So, as I said, there was a lot of discussion about this at the meeting. I would say that in general, this discussion paper received little support. Some committee members cited the unconvincing and hypothetical nature of some of the use cases presented. The German National Library suggested that RDA Chapter 23 and Appendix M may end up being reorganized and cautioned against making the proposed changes to MARC 21 while RDA is still in a state of flux. Other committee members voiced concern about the ability of current systems to implement badge changes to records based on this use of relationship designators. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is a comment from LC's Policy and Standards Division. And I would say that this is one of the harsher comments that was made in response to this discussion paper. They do not like it, and they intend to prohibit the use with LC subject headings if approved by MAC. Okay, here's more of what they said. We don't intend to revise LCSH policies if subfield I is approved for use, so catalogers would have to continue to duplicate headings. The only difference would be that the duplication would happen entirely within the 6XX block instead of coding one heading in the 6XX block and the other in the 7XX block. So here's what they're talking about. We'd be doing that one on the top with the two 6XX fields instead of the one on the bottom, which is representative of current use. So I thought this was a really interesting discussion paper. I mean, I kind of like the elegance of this proposal, and yet there was so much resistance to it. So, as I said to Suzanne, let's take a poll. And whoops, sorry. And here it is. So I just want to take like a little straw poll and get people's reactions to this idea. So let's all vote. Okay, let's end that, Suzanne. Okay, so this is really interesting. There was like almost like a 2-to-1 sort of vote against, right? Suzanne, do you know what happened to the results?
Yes, I think I relaunched it and it went away. Could you?
Okay. Well, it said
70%
said no and 27% said yes, right? So I'm going to just close that right now. I guess it's not unlike the reaction of the committee members at MAC, but I have to say I didn't want to influence people before we took the poll, but I have to say that my initial reaction to this discussion paper and reading the comments is that I was against it too, but one of the members of the PCC Standing Committee on Standards was in attendance at the MAC meeting in the audience. And he defended their paper, and I found the case actually quite convincing. So once again, this is a discussion paper. It's not a proposal, so it's not anything that we voted about yet. But it'll be really, really interesting to see if this paper returns, and we do get to vote on it. I'm wondering if there's any interest in actually writing some sort of a position paper from AALL. We certainly can do that. I'm the liaison and I can take the lead in that. However, I do feel like I would have to interview people or get a better idea of how people feel about it. So I may be doing that between now and ALA Annual in June. Okay.
So Jean, we do have a couple of questions coming in now with Chad. Just more about, could you give us another sense of what the defense put out in favor of the change was?
Yes, I can. So as we know, RDA is supposed to be a linked data model, and the PCC Standing Committee on Standards felt that using the entities that are provided for in RDA to construct these access points was more of a linked data-y kind of way to go about it instead of pre-coordinated strings. So I thought to myself, yeah, it's true. Can't argue with that. Any other questions before? Now I'm going to like change gears radically and we're going to talk about the CCDA stuff. Okay. Okay. Oops. Okay. So this is the link to the report that I wrote for TSLL, and it's up on the website right now. I think we're going to make these slides available to people, right, Suzanne? So that you don't have to write this down right now. Okay. So switching gears, I did, as Suzanne mentioned, I did attend one of the 2 CCDA meetings on behalf of Robert Bratton, who is our liaison to CCDA, and he was not able to attend midwinter. So I did go to this meeting and represent him at the meeting. So I had never actually been to a CCDA meeting ever before. It was a new experience for me. Their meetings are very lengthy. The one that I attended was scheduled to go from 1 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. but luckily we did get out an hour early. So it was only, what, 3.5 hours long instead of 4.5 hours long. Because RDA, the text of RDA is undergoing a revision right now. We're in this sort of hiatus period where no changes are being made to it. The job of CCDA ordinarily would be to entertain suggestions for changes to RDA, but nothing like that is happening. However, they did still manage to fill 3.5 hours worth of time. Some of it was talking about the changes to RDA itself. Some of it was spent talking about changes to the RDA toolkit. Some of it was spent talking about changes to the RDA governance structure. So what I've done is I'm giving you a couple of links here so that you can read this stuff yourself. The report of this LC liaison to CCDA, that was not actually delivered because the LC liaison to CCDA was not able to attend AALL Midwinter because of the budgetary problems in Washington that happened to come about right at the time of the meeting. So he wasn't able to come, but his report is available at that URL right there. Something else that was reported on was the PCC report for CCDA, and there's that link right there, but I am going to just talk about a couple of highlights from that report. Okay, so I'm thinking probably a lot of people are familiar with the RDA, PCC RDA Authorities Phase 3 project, which was going to be intended to update a whole big bunch of records in the LC authority file, the National Authority file. Okay, we were told in the PCC report that the plans for Phase 3 have been scaled back due to technical constraints at LC. I do not know the exact nature of the technical constraints. Enhancement updates that had been planned as a one-time file enrichment will instead take place as weekly installments. I think it might have something to do with the server load, actually. ISNI identifiers, that was going to be part of this Phase 3 upgrade. They're not going to be added after all, so that's too bad. Another piece of news, I don't know how many people are aware of this thing about limiting ISBD punctuation within MARC 21 bibliographic records. This is something that's been talked about for quite a long time. The Library of Congress, the National Library of Medicine, and OCLC have each created a set of test records that don't have punctuation. This test set of bibliographic records will be used to determine how well they function and display within library systems. The PCC test will run through July 1st, 2018. So I guess they're trying to see what sort of impact lack of punctuation is going to have on, discoverability and the ability to interpret records in a catalog. Okay. Probably you've heard about the 3R project. That's the RDA Toolkit Restructure and Redesign project. I put a link here of the most recent project status report. These are the RDA Toolkit blog, I think, or maybe it looks like it's a special section devoted to this project. They put up this update on last Wednesday, so it's quite recent. It was after AALL Midwinter. We found out at AALL Midwinter that the rollout of the redesigned RDA Toolkit is scheduled for June 13th. But at least it's not a Friday the 13th. It was going to be in April, but I guess they couldn't make that deadline. The debut of the redesigned toolkit with only an English language version of the content and the possibility of a single policy statement set. They're planning to bring up more languages and more sets of policy statements. I believe it's in late August or September. Now, this is an interesting thing here. The 3R project currently has no plan for instruction numbering, but the RDA Steering Committee is actively exploring options. So when people heard this, and I went to a number of meetings at Midwinter, where the same information was presented, and people are just wondering, like, how are we supposed to refer to the instructions in RDA if they are not numbered? But the reason they don't want to do the numbering is because when instructions are added or canceled and removed from RDA, it messes up the numbering. And so something that was numbered one way at one point might end up having a completely different number in the future, and it's, you know, you can't really refer to them, and it's just a mess. So I would be very interested in knowing what they plan to do instead of numbering, but they are said to be actively exploring options. Okay. This is a picture of the welcome screen of the redesigned RDA toolkit. Something to notice, I mean, it looks quite different from the one that we use now. It's got this thing here that's, unfortunately, I don't have a picture of what you see when you pull down this entity screen, but it's just a list of the 12 RDA entities that are going to be in the toolkit once these updates have been made. So it'll have the WEMI entities, and it'll have some new ones that are being added. I think time span is one of them. I can't remember them all, but what's happening with the RDA toolkit, probably you have heard this. It is incorporating things from what's called the library reference model. The library reference model is a publication from IFLA, International Federation of Library Associations, and what it is attempting to do is to consolidate those models that are underlying RDA. So we know that RDA is based on FRBR and FRAD and FSAD, those functional requirements models. So the library reference model, or LRM as people refer to it, is a consolidation of those three functional requirements models that we have been used to. The people who are redesigning the toolkit and reworking RDA are trying to incorporate these things. So you'll see some interesting differences, I think, when this comes up in June. Okay. Here's a couple of links. The first one here is a big list of new presentations from the RDA Steering Committee, where they talk about the changes that are coming to RDA, and some of them are ones that were given at the RDA pre-conference at AALL midwinter. I did not attend that. It cost like, I don't know, $200 something to attend, but they did put the presentations up. The quality of the audio is not wonderful, but it might be worth checking some of them out. Down here is a link to the report on the RDA Steering Committee activities for the last half of 2017. This is a 7-page long report by Kathy Glennon. It's not too hard to read, so that might be something worth checking out also. Okay. We heard a lot about the new RDA governance model, and I think we've heard some of this before. I think Robert, who's the regular CCDA liaison for us, has reported on it in the past, but it was reiterated this time around. Membership in the RDA Steering Committee includes a representative from each of 6 geographic regions. Apparently these regions are taken from the United Nations geographic regions, and we are in the North American region, of course. This is how it's going to work. We're going to have something called the North American RDA Committee, or NARDAC. It's the entity responsible for representing the North American region on the RDA Steering Committee. NARDAC's membership comes from the following North American communities that have implemented RDA: AALL, the Canadian Committee on Cataloging, and the Library of Congress. They are allowed to have up to 2 members from each community. For AALL, I believe the representatives are Kathy Glennon and Dominique Bourassa, who's from Yale. NARDAC's representative to the RDA Steering Committee will be elected by NARDAC, and the new RDA governance model is intended to be in place by 2019. So, do people have questions about this stuff? Suzanne, I can't hear you. Are you muted? Okay.
I am. There's nothing coming across in chat right now. I was just curious. I mean, how does that representation compare to what we have now? And I'm probably way behind on what they're calling themselves.
That's a good question. So is Robert here?
I think so.
If he's here, maybe he can tell us.
Okay.
I think he's saying something.
I know.
I
It's
can't hear it.
coming out clearly. That's too bad. Robert, if you have a chance, if you could type something in or take a look at your audio setup.
We could tell that you were talking, Robert, but we couldn't hear what you're saying.
Hello.
Okay, I got a little bit.
I heard like, oh.
Okay, well, there's something coming in on the chat that currently ALA has one representative to the RSC.
Okay.
So I guess I was thinking we had more folks, like the LC had a representative or something like that, but okay.
That's just kind of what I was thinking too.
And the Canadian libraries too, I guess. I don't know. Okay. So
well,
it's not
I mean, one thing I know about the RDA steering committee in the past, when it was called the Joint Steering Committee, is they would have proposals and things brought to them, and all those national libraries and things would give a reaction to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether they were in favor of it or against it, or if they thought changes should be made, that kind of thing. And it seemed like they got an awful lot of reactions. I mean, there were a lot of papers to read for that. So I'm thinking that this new governance model will have fewer people actually involved, but that was my impression anyway.
Okay.
All right. Well, we still have some time if there's any other questions. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. LC does have their own representative. My understanding is that all of North America, yes, that's right. All of North America will be represented by one representative. And also, I guess I could mention that Kathy Glennon, who, Robert, she was the ALA representative to the Joint Steering Committee, I think. She's going to be the chair in January 2019 of the RDA Steering Committee.
Wow.
Oh, okay, good. That's correct.
Okay, good.
Okay. Anything else?
What are did they talk anything about the other regions? I mean, each region's just going to have one, so I know Europe is also very active. As you can tell from the German.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Suzanne. So if you go to the RSC's website and you'll see the areas, you can click on a link and it'll show you those areas. And when you click on the individual ones, the only people who have anything are the Europeans. They have a bunch of stuff under their link.
Oh, okay.
Would IFLA have a role in this? That's a question for Robert. IFLA wasn't mentioned in this context at the meeting that I attended. I can tell you that much, Alan. Yeah, I'm not sure there is either. Okay. Right. I think that's right. That was my impression too. Okay. Well, I'm glad that we had this opportunity for me to talk to you while this meeting is fresh in my mind.
How would you like people to get in contact with you if they felt strongly about this 600 subfield I?
Oh, that's such a good
666.
question. And you know what? I was going to make a slide with my email on it, and I neglected to do that. So my email address is M like Mary, P like Peter, 8 at cornell.edu. Yes, thanks, Suzanne. Well, thanks everyone for attending.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. And like I said, this has been recorded, so I'll send that out to everyone shortly. I think I've got everyone's emails. So thank y'all. Very great. Thank you, Jean.
Thank you, Suzanne. You've done a great job.